Hey, it's Rod Yates. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my special guest today is singer-songwriter Maya, also known as MXmtoon. In many ways, MXmtoon is the definition of a modern pop star. She grew up in Oakland making music in her bedroom and posting covers of pop songs she'd perform on her ukulele to YouTube. Eventually, she started uploading original songs to SoundCloud, and by the time she left school, she had more than 10,000 followers on the platform. That trajectory hasn't really slowed since, and part of the reason for that, beside the fact she makes incredibly captivating indie pop, is the deep bond she's formed with her audience. As she says in this interview, she's pretty much grown up online, and her social media and YouTube presence helped her forge this organic connection with her fans without the help of traditional music industry gatekeepers like record labels. It's a fascinating story and one we go deep on in this interview, but we started by talking about Rising. I've seen you talk about this record and say that a lot of these songs were survival music for you. In what way was that the case?
I think a lot of it ended up kind of being music that I needed to listen to in a very tumultuous time, I think, for a lot of us. In the last 2 years, we were left with no answers of what the future was going to look like. And I think we're still kind of figuring out what the horizon looks like, because with COVID, we never know. It's a daunting thing to look at. And I realized throughout the process of just kind of being in quarantine and being with my family and also spending a lot of time on my own, just reflecting on, what was I emotionally going through at that point? What am I still going through? And what might I go through in the future? I realized a lot of the music I ended up making was kind of just like a reassurance to myself that everything was going to be okay, even if it didn't feel like it was at that point. So I think I was kind of filling in the gaps, the music gaps that I felt like I didn't have with my own album. Yeah.
and that reassurance, did you seek that in? Because quite a lot of the album is quite upbeat and up-tempo, and there is very much a feel-good vibe musically. Is that the reassurance that you were trying to give yourself by creating that kind of music?
Definitely. I think in my own personal life, I don't actually listen to a lot of maybe more down-tempo, melancholy songs, which is funny because I think that's kind of how I ended up being known in a lot of my own work early on, was like these sort of sad, maybe more stripped-down versions of songs. But it was really fun for me on this album to, I think, emotionally kind of understand what I was going through lyrically, but from a production standpoint, to just kind of dive into the deep end of what I love to listen to in my own free time, which is really fun pop music. So right. I tried to kind of see if I could even do that in my own project. Yeah.
Sure. I do think, obviously that pandemic period, which we're still in, but it was very hard for everyone. But I did particularly feel for people of your age, people who are kind of that 19, 20 years old where you've just left school and you're ready to take life and just take it by the neck and give it a good shake. And of course, you were robbed of that. Were you ready for the introspection, I guess, or the period of introspection that allowed?
I think I was more prepared for it as an introvert. I don't mind spending too much time on my own, and we definitely got a lot of that. But even as an introvert, I think I was definitely gearing up for so much of my life in 2020. And I mean, I was 19 when the pandemic started, and I turned 22 in a couple weeks. Like that, it's crazy to me that so much time has passed, and I'm in this new era of my life that, I kind of skipped over that late teenage part of like being 19 and figuring out what that was going to mean before I turned into my 20s. And now I'm fully in my 20s. But it's interesting. I think, I think back on that moment of learning that everything was kind of being turned on its head, and I was prepared to go on tour. I was releasing 2 EPs that year, and I was really ready to kind of take charge of this next chapter and be, excited to dive into the deep end of being an artist. And I just recently got off the North America leg of my tour for Rising, and it was kind of exactly what I was supposed to do 2 years ago. And so it's interesting to kind of jump back into this moment in time that I felt so ready for at that period, and then kind of have it delayed for so long until I get to actually do it now. So it's interesting. I think I'm still kind of working out the effects of what the last 2 years have been like, but sure. I'm thankful that it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
When you did finally get to tour, did it feel like the last few years hadn't happened and you just picked up, or was there a period of adjustment?
Definitely a period of adjustment. I think, in 2020, I would have just gotten off of my 2019 fall tour. And so I would have been really ready to kind of be on a live stage and be ready for it. But it felt like learning to walk again. Like I hadn't played a live show in 2 years with my own audience. And so it was really interesting to kind of jump back into that setting, because I've really only toured for maybe 3 months of my entire artist career, even though I've been doing this for years now. And we just didn't have the option to. So it felt interesting. It felt like kind of going backwards and starting from square one again.
Sure.
But I got my legs back, eventually.
And I've seen you say that a lot of, or some of the songs off Rising are almost like a conversation with some of the songs off your debut album, The Masquerade. I think you've referred to Sad Disco as being the older sister to Prom Dress. How conscious were you when you were writing that this was the case?
I didn't think I realized until after after making the whole entire thing how much of it echoed the sentiment of my first album and past projects. But I think it makes so much sense. Obviously, like, I'm one person, so if I make art about my life, I think a lot of it's going to be cyclical. But I think I feel really kind of glad about how naturally everything evolved together. And I was listening back to my EPs Dawn and Dusk over like last week when I was driving back from the very last show of the tour. And I realized a lot of the vocabulary, even in the lyrics, ended up becoming titles of songs of this project. And it's interesting to me that kind of happens. I guess it speaks so much to the fact that we've kind of all been sitting in these same thoughts trying to figure out what to make of them for the last 2 years, and to listen to those two projects that were made at the very beginning of this entire period of the pandemic, and then listen to the project that I just most recently released after kind of the end of figuring out what those last 2 years have been like. It's cool to see the progression of the way that I felt about it 2 years ago versus now, and kind of learning and growing from it and understanding it on a maybe more optimistic level than I did initially when I was first writing about it. Yeah.
Okay. And there is, on the record, there are some certain themes of aging that sort of pop up now and again.
Yes.
One of the interesting takes on aging, though, and one of the really touching takes on it is in the song Florida, which I understand you wrote after seeing your grandfather the last time before he passed away, and he was 81. What was it like for you writing that song?
It was really emotional. I held on to, I think, the premise of it for a really long time before I felt ready to actually put it into a piece of work. It took me about a full year after his passing to kind of understand and process the experience of seeing him get older and understanding, what death means, I think, too. And it's really interesting, I think, in the large scheme of the project to kind of understand, what does growing up mean? And is it this kind of like finite period of our life? Is it exactly when we're in our teenage into, being in our 20s? But I look at someone like my grandfather, who I saw him for his 81st birthday, and he still had so much that he wanted to do and so much that he felt excited about in the world, despite, looking at his life and understanding that maybe he didn't have that much time left. And I think, it was really important to me to kind of express the dimensionality of what it means to be older. And I think, to understand it from my own experience of turning 22 and turning 21, but then also to look at the other opposite end of somebody who is so much older, but still kind of has those same questions of even wondering who he is now that he's in his 80s. Like, it's this never ending question. And I think that can be so scary, but there can also be an enormous amount of peace in knowing that it's this thing that we'll just constantly have with us, and to kind of find a comfortable relationship with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So you've actually found a little bit of peace in that, the fact that you may never know exactly who you are, but it's more the peace of just understanding that that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I even talked to him when he was still here. I was just like, I feel super lost in understanding who I am. And he's like, well, I still feel lost, and I am in my 80s. And I was like, well, that's kind of awful to know, but I guess also maybe it's great because, my grandfather and I can still relate on this thing, even though we're 60 years apart. Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm. What did that song mean to your parents, or in particular the parent of the whose father they were?
My dad loved it. I think, for him, music has always been something that I connected with my grandfather specifically too. I would say he was the most musically gifted person in my family. There's not many people that play music in my family besides me. But my grandfather had like a huge collection of guitars and would always play like folk songs in the living room. And my dad, he has such a visceral memory of that too. And I think for me to be able to kind of carry along my grandpa's legacy and love of music, and also to write about him in my own work, I think meant so much. And I've even done this with like my grandma on my mom's side too. Like, I think music is such a powerful way for us to commemorate the people in our lives. And I feel really, really lucky that I have the tools and access to be able to make a piece of work that I can keep forever. And also to kind of remind not only myself, but my dad too. And, my grandma, that my grandpa's impact and presence is still with us, regardless of if he's not physically here with us anymore.
With that, the idea that you just mentioned of your grandfather playing music and you watching him play music. Is that one of your earliest musical memories?
Absolutely. I think, I have so many different memories that music are involved in, but live music specifically was never something that I really experienced until a little bit later in like being a teenager. I've been to maybe 6 concerts that weren't my own concerts in my entire lifetime. It's crazy. I get a little overwhelmed by being in a room filled with people and lots of live music. But my grandpa, he was kind of my first understanding of somebody who just loved music unconditionally and loved to share it with people around him. And my entire iTunes library is just songs that he would send me that he really loved and everything. So he definitely is a huge marker of kind of introducing me to what music can mean to a person.
What sort of songs would he send you?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on it, but he loved Electric Light Orchestra, and so we listened to a lot of them. But he loved, like, I have books about like Joni Mitchell, and like just thinking he loved to find kind of these resemblances of artists that he really loved and being able to be like, I think you're like this person and this song is like this, and just to be able to kind of like connect with me on that level of thinking, oh my gosh. He also really loved that he could understand the words that I was saying in my songs. One of his biggest complaints is that music nowadays, that people just mumble. that was one of his things that he didn't like. Yeah.
So you would send him the songs that you had been writing?
I would. I was really excited to hear his opinion and get his insight. And I don't know what he would think about the disco music that I'm making nowadays, but I think he would have been excited to hear that I was having fun. Yeah.
And you were saying that you've been to around 6 shows that weren't yours. What was your first concert that you went to?
I actually had a great first concert. I went to see the Black Keys at Oracle Arena in Oakland, and I think I was 14 years old when I went, and it was the first time I'd ever been at a concert, which is an arena show as your first show is definitely maybe not what I would recommend to people, but it was super fun for me, and I'm a massive fan of the Black Keys, and so it was really great to be able to have the opportunity to go see them live. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, this is really fun. And I'm now trying to make it a mission to go to live shows now that they're back. So that way I can see people in person. But yeah, I haven't been to a lot of them.
Sure. So who taught you how to perform live then? If you weren't seeing that many shows prior to actually playing, where were you? Who were you using as an inspiration?
This is a great question. I'm glad that I get to answer it, because I think my live show is very untraditional compared to probably the typical live show of other artists. I'd say my live show is less of a concert and more of a podcast. I feel like it's kind of like a live stream, but on a stage. I'd say it's, it's a good mixture of like, I sing a lot. My set is about 90 minutes long, and, a good chunk of that is, singing. And I'd say maybe around 15 minutes of it is actually just me talking and having a conversation with people. And that's not something that I typically see on stages with other artists, but I think it works so well with me and my audience because we do have this kind of like banter that we have that exists between us, where we can have a back and forth. So a lot of my inspirations, I think, just came from, seeing how it felt to be on a stage and understanding, what do I want to do, not only as an artist, but as a person. Like, how do I create this environment with people within this 2-hour period that I have of their time, to sing songs with them, but also to connect with them, like to get to know these people that are coming to the shows, because it's so easy to just step into a room and come out of it and not really understand who you were singing to. But like, I try my best to use the opportunity that I have in front of me to see them as people and not just as participants, I guess.
Sure. And because you do have such a great online connection with your audience and your community, but that ability to actually see these people in the flesh now, does that make, I imagine that makes for as special an occasion for you as it does the audience?
It is. I mean, I started online. I was always posting things to a number of people that were put next to the followers portion on a page. And it was a really weird experience to eventually play shows and understand that those are real people, and like real people that'll buy tickets and show up to your concerts. But I think it's something that I've grown to just, I was terrified in the beginning, but now it's something that I really love. I think it's really special that you can share this one moment in time with these people that you might not know super well, but at that point in this period of during the week and during that evening, everyone in that room is experiencing the exact same thing. And how cool is that to have a bunch of strangers just like have their life paths just collide with each other for a second and then split off again.
Right.
I think that's really, really neat.
Yeah, nice. We were speaking briefly about you watching your grandfather play, and I just wanted to talk to you about growing up in Oakland and some of the music that you were exposed to there. Was music a big thing in your household?
Music was. I think my parents understood, they loved music, and I'm really glad that they had the music taste that they did. I grew up listening to a lot of funk and soul music, and which is hilarious because that's not at all what I ended up making. But, my grandfather on my mom's side, he loved classical music. And so I'd listen to his vinyls, and like he would always have jazz or classical on in, their place. And so I think I had a lot of areas in my life where music was always present and I could understand the importance of it. And I grew up playing classical instruments as, a small Asian kid. I was required by my mother to learn how to play the cello and the violin. And I think, my relationship with music early on, especially classical music, was always that it was very rigid and I didn't like all the rules and it was really hard. And of course, it would be hard for a 7-year-old to learn how to play classical music because I don't think 7-year-old brains are equipped to be learning that. But I had a lot of moments, I think, where I understood music and I liked it in certain ways, but I also didn't really have my own relationship with it. I think that I could figure out until later on when I learned how to play the ukulele. But Oakland was a great backdrop to be able to understand music and to see it, played live at like the lake in my town growing up, and to see people playing on like drums and everything. So I think I had a great introduction to it, but it took me a minute to figure out what is my own style throughout all of it. Mm-hmm.
And am I right in thinking your parents were teachers?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Right. What did they teach?
So my mom was an English teacher and my dad teaches like computer science basically, and different kind of like, I guess the best way is to describe it is he's kind of like a home ec teacher of the future. He teaches how to 3D print and like code and everything. But yes, they're both teachers. So I grew up with educators as my parents.
Yeah. Did that put a pressure on you to be a good student? Did you feel that?
I think I did in some ways. I definitely feel like my parents kind of broke the pressure that they felt growing up from their own parents to kind of, give me and my brother more freedom to explore and be creative and not feel that pressure. But I definitely put that pressure on myself too growing up just want to be the best that I possibly could be. Oh my gosh, I was a total overachiever. I still am an overachiever.
Where does that come from?
I think, both my parents are definitely overachievers too. And even though they were trying to be like, there's no pressure, like just do your best and do fine. I definitely saw them and I was like, but I have to be really, really good at this and I got to be the best. And, I guess it was fun to put pressure on myself, I guess, in that way sometimes. Give me something to do. Yeah.
Right. And did your mother's Asian heritage, did that play a big role in growing up? Were you exposed to that culture?
Definitely. I mean, I think, my mom grew up with a lot of pressure on her to just, be a really successful kid and to do really well in school. And I mean, I think, we both have that perfectionist mindset of like trying to just make sure we're masters at whatever we do. And we get really frustrated whenever we're not innately good at something. And I think, a lot of people can relate to that experience too. But especially growing up as like, Chinese and Asian Americans specifically, I think there's so much pressure in families where, your grandparents have immigrated to this country and like you want to make sure that you do them proud and you do a good job and everything. I think I can definitely relate to that. And I had moments of that growing up too, of just kind of like breaking down the generational pressures that I think a lot of us can feel when that's the case. But yes, definitely.
Yeah. So does a career in the arts, where does that play into that idea of, as you just mentioned, your grandparents, that they're moving to America and that desire to, I guess, make the most of that opportunity. Where did a career in the arts sort of fit into that? How was that seen?
Yeah, I mean, my grandma, when I first told her that I was pursuing music, there was, of course, the hesitation of like, really? Like, are you sure? Is this the right choice? And my own parents, too, they were just concerned. I think as any parents are with your kid choosing to do something as like vague as pursuing music at the age of 18, I'm sure that I would have had a heart attack if my own kid came up to me and told me that they were going to do music instead of go to college. But my own grandma, I'm really lucky. She's a painter, and I think she understood the importance of creativity and art and understanding and expressing your story through something visual, and to also kind of understand my own love of music and be supportive of me trying to pursue something like that. Like my grandma, she had so much pressure placed upon her growing up, especially like as a young girl in Hong Kong, and learning that visual arts was something that she loved to do, and then moving to America and trying to pursue that more and do it in college and in California away from her family. I think, for her to see her own grandchild pursue something in the same kind of path and understanding music as the thing that she loved, my grandma was so supportive. But she was concerned, of course, as any grandma was, but I feel really, really lucky that she understood and could accept that as a reality. Yeah.
And I understand that the first song you ever wrote was actually for a school project when you were about 13.
Yes.
Even though it was for a school project, were you hooked? Once you wrote that song, did you immediately understand what it meant to you to write a song?
I think I kind of did. I mean, the song I wrote was really, really bad, though. Like, I have the lyrics still. I've saved them on my computer, and I read them back the other day, and I was just like, wow, this is an awful song. But it was just a bunch of kind of mishmashed words that rhymed together, and the song was about having to actually write a song and not knowing what the song would be about. And I remember writing it and kind of being like, this is silly and kind of fun. And I think it did lend itself to me writing other songs that were kind of like supposed to be funny, but also kind of getting at this like sort of idea that, maybe it's a little bit sadder and more frustrating. And I think, my earlier songs, for example, like 1-800-DATE-ME was like a satire song about feeling lonely. But if I hadn't written that song when I was 13 years old about not knowing what to write a song about, I think I wouldn't have figured out that I could keep writing songs that could also be kind of like funny and weird and satirical. So I think I was hooked. I kept writing, and, I wrote a lot of bad songs after that point. And I still write some bad songs sometimes, but, I got better at it.
Did it give you an element of freedom from some of the pressures you were talking about, and perhaps even an element of control, that this was something that you could make your own and actually control?
Exactly. Yes, 100%. I think, as that people pleaser kid that was a teacher's pet and did everything that everybody wanted her to do, songwriting was this other realm of creativity that I hadn't given other people access to. It was only for me, and could only be about what I was experiencing and what I was feeling. It didn't have rules. It didn't have homework. It was just for me, and I could spend as much time as I wanted on a song, or as little time, and it didn't need to be good. It didn't need to be bad. It could just be what it was. Yeah. And so I loved it because no one was telling me how to do it. It wasn't like classical music where I had to, play something softly or play something loudly. I just got to make my own rules. And I think that was really exciting because I didn't have a lot of areas in my life, I guess, as a teenager where I felt like I had that freedom. And I think, other teenagers find other outlets. I was just one of those kids that I didn't go to parties. I didn't do anything. I was just in the back of my room using Rhyme Zone, learning how to write songs. And that was it.
It worked out all right.
It did work out okay, yeah.
What about even figuring out how to sing? Did you come to singing naturally? Like, when did you realize you could sing?
I don't think I realized that I could sing. At the time I learned, I think it felt like I figured it out really late. But after looking back on it, like, I figured out that I could sing when I was 10 years old, and that's still very young. But at that point when I was 10, I was like, I feel like everybody who can sing already developed that skill already, and like I am really behind on it. And I realized that I liked singing when I started singing at home with my dad. And my dad was, he was trying to learn how to play the guitar a little bit more, and he shared the song with me, Wonderwall by Oasis. And I really liked that song, and it's become a bit of a meme now, but I still like that song. And it was one of the songs that I would sing with him at home. And I switched schools when I was 10 years old to a different school. My mom got a new job, and I followed her. And the way that I decided that I could make friends and kind of join a community was by joining the band. And at that point, I heard that they were playing Wonderwall by Oasis, and I knew that there was a cello part, and I knew that I played cello outside of school. So I went to the band instructor, and I told him, hey, I can play the cello. Do you need a cello for your rock band? And he said, no. Big surprise, they didn't need a cellist for the rock band. But he asked me if I sang the song too. And I told him, yeah, I sang it with my dad at home. And I ended up auditioning, and he really said that I had a good voice. And I just kept doing it. I realized that I loved singing from that point on. But I did it because I wanted to make friends initially. And I am so glad that I made the decision to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that sort of determined the way that you've run your career since, that idea of seeing music as communication and a way to build community, particularly, again, going back to your online presence and how communicative you are with your fans? Do you think it's come from that experience?
Yes, totally. I think, my understanding of music has always been one to kind of bridge people together through experience and joint understanding of like an emotion. And I think, with my own songs, in the beginning of posting them online, it felt very much kind of like an emotional release of just kind of putting something out into the world and feeling like no one was going to see it because there was just so much stuff on the internet. And of course, no one would click on my profile out of all of the different profiles to click on. But I think as it went on, I realized that it was also kind of like this scream for community and wanting to find other people that felt the same way that I did. And eventually I felt so lucky because I did find those people that would comment on my songs that I was writing and say, oh my gosh, I feel this way too. I'm so glad that you wrote a song that could communicate the way that I feel. And I think it's kind of become this like underlying ethos of MXmtoon is just being able to find the words for people when they might not know exactly what they're feeling. And, I can write song upon song about my experience, but I feel like it means more when it's able to kind of speak for a larger group of people beyond just myself. So yeah, I think it's an incredible tool for community building, and I try and do my best to keep it that way. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the first time you got that feedback, that first comment?
Oh my goodness. I can't remember the exact first one, but I do remember the first time I wrote a song that I felt like didn't have any sort of jokes in it, and it was just about the way that I felt without trying to disguise it under a level of like funniness. And it was literally a demo, and it was called Something because I didn't know exactly what to call it, and it was like 45 seconds long. And it ended up getting, a lot of traction on SoundCloud. And there was a lot of comments of people being like, this is so good, I wish it was longer. And so I ended up writing a longer version of it, which turned into the song called Feelings Are Fatal. And now that's one of my most streamed songs that I have in my discography. And I'm so glad that people spoke up and told me that they felt the same way, because otherwise I wouldn't have felt empowered to do that. I wouldn't have made a song that I'm so glad has life the way that it does now. But yeah, everything sticks with me. I read people's comments as much as I possibly can, and I feel thankful if even just one person connects to what I have to say. Yeah.
Sure. I think I've read you talk about that song, Feelings Are Fatal, and say that when you listen to it now, you hear a 17-year-old kid who didn't go to therapy and needed somebody to talk to. Is that what that gave you?
Definitely. I think it was definitely, it goes back to what you even mentioned earlier, just feeling like songwriting was my one area that existed solely just for me. And so I didn't have to be happy. I didn't have to be sad. I didn't have to be angry. I didn't have to be any emotion that I wanted to be other than the one that I wanted to explore and express. And at that point, Feelings Are Fatal was about the sadness that I was feeling. And I didn't feel like I had a lot of avenues to express that other than just writing a song about it and releasing it. So definitely, I think it's always been a form of therapy for me, and now I do go to therapy, so I find myself writing maybe slightly happier songs than I normally would when I was 17.
Right. The flip side to putting that music out there and getting those great comments, of course, is that you open your music to criticism as well from people that you don't know. Did you have to learn to come up with mechanisms to cope with that?
I think I'm still learning. And I try not to be too hard on myself because I have grown up online. I've had, thousands of people watching me grow up and understand myself. And I think it's really easy to let scrutiny get to your head because my brain is probably not even fully formed yet. Like I am a baby and I'm still a kid. Like I think sometimes it gets a little overwhelming to be online and know that there are so many people watching you try and figure out who you are. So I'm still developing tools, but I think the biggest thing is about trying to reground myself in like kind of my day-to-day life. I think there was a point probably earlier on when I felt so overcome with this excitement about being on social media and being online and being available to the people that were consuming what I had to put out and share. So much so that, I didn't have a lot of points of kind of grounded people to talk with that were in my actual day-to-day life. I was just so focused on being online. So I think, now that I'm in my 20s instead of being in my teenage years, it's been about kind of trying to figure out who am I? Who am I as Maya and, not as MXmtoon, but what do I need as a person and an individual that exists outside of social media? So don't have an exact answer, but I'll get back to you when I figure it out.
It's all a process. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that idea. So I think you were 17 when you started uploading these songs, thereabouts. And is it true that by the time you left school, you had 10,000 followers on SoundCloud already?
Yeah, I did. I think I might have had more than that. The timeline gets funky to me. I can't remember like fully what it's like, but I do remember my brother was the first person that I told that I like had followers online. I didn't tell my parents, and I remember telling him, I was like, Dylan, I think I need to tell you something, but don't tell mom and dad. Like, I'm not ready for them to know yet. But I have a lot of followers online. And he goes, yeah, like how many? Like, it can't be that many. And I told him, I was like, I have 10,000 followers. And he went, oh my God, that's a lot of followers. And I remember just being like, wow, this is a really big moment for me. And I think, at that point, it was just like this little tiny, it felt like a snowball. And I could decide whether or not I wanted to keep building it to be bigger or if I wanted to stop it completely. But I think I was really curious about what it could turn into. But I did have like 10,000 followers that I had gained all by myself. And I remember just being like, I couldn't connect the fact that was real people.
Yeah, yeah.
Felt like playing a video game. Yeah.
What did it do to your studies? Did you ever sort of decide that actually I don't need to work so hard. I'm going to develop this. This is my future.
I definitely still worked really hard because I think in a lot of ways I viewed like a lot of aspects of my life like a video game. And so I just had to do like really, really well and get all of my achievements on everything. And so in school, like I still did really well. But I remember being in like my history class and like answering emails for like press interviews and like doing all these things by myself and just feeling like, I feel like I'm like a secret agent. I'm living this like double life. I'm a student during the day. I felt like I was Hannah Montana, I guess is the best way to describe it. Yeah. But I managed to balance it okay. And eventually, I think I told my mom and dad around like the second half of my senior year of high school. And I told them, I was like, we've been applying to colleges. I was applying to be an architecture major. And I told them, I was like, I don't know if that's the right thing for me right now. I don't know if that's what I want to do. And they were really supportive, thankfully, and hearing me out and understanding. And they kind of let me go off on my way, but they told me that I needed to finish high school strong. So I did do that. I did it for them.
Right. Did they go, I presume when you told them you had these followers, did you watch them go searching?
Yes, I did. It was mortifying. It was so scary. I remember the day I told them, I walked into the kitchen. I was like, Mom and Dad, so I need to tell you something. And I think they thought it was way worse than just their child making songs in the back of her bedroom. I think they were ready for me to tell them like some crazy, crazy thing that I was going to be like emotionally scarred from for the rest of my life. And I told them that I was making music and sharing it online. And my parents went, really? Is that what you're doing in the back of your room? Like, we thought you were just singing songs that you really liked. And I was like, I am, but I'm posting them online and I'm making like covers and I'm making original music too. And they were like, can we listen to it? And I was like, you can listen to it, but you can't do it in front of me. And I remember I left the room to go sit in my bedroom, but the kitchen speakers are really, really loud. And so I could hear them clicking through all of my YouTube videos and watching them out loud and like just feeling like my face was so red. I was so embarrassed, but I also knew that was the only way to just get it over with. I was like, it's going to be so much worse if I wait any longer. So I just had to get it over with and see their reaction.
We'll be back with more from MXmtoon after this break. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with MXmtoon. I think I've seen you use the term that you sort of stumbled into the music industry, which I think is a really interesting place to come from and a mindset to have going into it as well. Do you think that impacted the way that you approached the music industry or the way that you felt as opposed to, are you an imposter? Do you belong here? How did you feel coming into the industry with that mindset?
100% had imposter syndrome. I still have imposter syndrome. I think it's so easy, especially when you're not actively seeing your own identity reflected in the area of work that you're pursuing. Like, I didn't have mixed race, Asian American, queer people to look up to that were, writing songs and sharing them online. That didn't exist ever in, my sort of consumption of the internet beyond maybe spaces like YouTube. And so that was why I felt comfortable to post on that. But it was also really scary, I think, to think about pursuing something in the music industry when there wasn't anybody that looked like me, that sounded like me, that felt like me, and to also do it in such an untraditional way as well. And to be a young person too. I think it's so easy for, people to be really judgmental of anybody that's online, but I think you are more susceptible to criticism and frankly like bigotry and hate and discrimination when you have identities that aren't necessarily reflected in the larger scheme of things. So it was scary to me, but I think, the stumble that I felt like I was going through in order to get into the industry also allowed me to open up the door to understand that there is not a right way that this needs to be done and that, the non-traditional pathway is still a valid one, even if it's not something you actively see happening. And, you know, lots of people have blown up on the internet, but I do feel like I was kind of on this like very first wave of bedroom pop that I got carried on with me. And it's interesting to see kind of the progression into the way that the music industry has totally been turned on its head in the past like 3 years too. So I don't know, it's weird. I'm still figuring it out too.
Yeah. But I think it's a really interesting thing you said, you know, that transition over the last 3 years, because to me, it kind of almost flips the power dynamic in terms of, you know, a few years ago, I guess you have particularly a lot of older people up higher in the music industry, and they have their structured ways of doing things. But here you were, a new generation of artists who's forging a new way to do things. So you actually have the knowledge and the ability and the track record of having done that. Do you think that there was a shift in the power dynamic? Did you sense that you were actually teaching these people in positions of power how to do things?
Yes. And I have a actual like very concrete example of something like that happening in my own life. I remember early in the day of TikTok, when TikTok was kind of becoming more popular over the course of the pandemic, I went to the TikTok office and I taught their staff how to use their app. Like I literally, they were like, can you tell us how to do this? And I was like, of course. But I was also really confused why I was the person that was explaining to them how to use their app. But it was this really interesting point of feeling like, oh my gosh, like we do have a lot of power to kind of use these tools that are at our disposal to, you know, empower ourselves to become people that have a larger audience. And I think that's such an interesting thing to see, that artists are really in the driver's seat. Like you don't have the typical gatekeepers that you normally would to decide who gets to have a platform, who is reaching out to certain people and different audience members. So it's really exciting. And I think that's why we've seen an increase in diversity of voices and different kinds of artists and everything. It's honestly very interesting to kind of see how like labels and big corporations are stumbling over themselves to figure out how to make sense of it all and to understand, you know, what do they need to do to kind of keep up to speed with the way that things are progressing. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas it's all second nature to you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm really glad I grew up on the internet. It's very innate to me. Yeah.
That fear you spoke of earlier about coming into the music industry, did you have anyone that you could confide in, or anyone that was a bit of a role model that could help guide you through those early days?
Not really. I think it was difficult. Both my parents, again, they were teachers. No one in my family had any clue of like what it meant to be able to find managers, to find a lawyer, to find a booking agent. And I feel so lucky because my team of people that I work with now are all incredible people that I think I kind of just manifested really good people to work with, and then they kind of ended up just happening to show up. But it was really scary. I mean, I definitely try and make it a point to just work with really incredibly strong women whenever possible, whether they're producers or writers. And I think someone that I even look to as a huge point of kind of my own confidence in growing it has been my vocal teacher. Her name is Libby, and I've been working with her since I was 17 years old. And so it's really special to be able to have those people in your life that empower you to be, she says, be the diva is her response to me whenever I tell her I'm not feeling super confident or anything. She's like, Maya, you need to be the diva. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. Like, I think, you know, it's special to have those points, but then again, I mean, the music industry is such a male-dominated space. And so to find those points of connection and representation it's hard. But when you find them, they're there, and they really, really matter. Yeah.
Nice. A couple of the people who you've collaborated with in the past, Carly Rae Jepsen and Meryl Garbus, who's, of course, Tune Yards. Did they have any advice for you? Did you get to talk to them about any of your experiences coming into the industry?
Well, both of those collaborations happened over the course of the pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of in-person time that I got to actually have with them. But I think even seeing the confidence that they have when they operate in a space like music, whether it's Carly Rae coming in and saying, gosh, Carly Rae Jepsen told me that the song she featured on when she first agreed to doing it, she was like, this song is amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. That's incredible. And it gave me such a confidence boost. And I think, you know, it's even those small interactions of just people building each other up and acknowledging the hard work that we put in. It matters so much. And that sentence is going to stick with me until the day I die, of just saying, oh my God, Carly Rae Jepsen thought a song that I wrote was good. Like, I am never going to forget that moment ever. And looking at producers like Meryl Garbus, who I grew up listening to Tune Yards. I love that project. And to know Meryl and to, you know, see the confidence and to have worked with her and understand the way that she operates in a room where she can produce and go back and forth and confidently have an idea and go and execute it. I think it's so inspiring to me as somebody who is still kind of figuring out my I guess sea legs is the best way to put it. Like I just don't really know what it means to be a producer, a writer, an artist, and any other way other than just being myself. And so to watch these incredible role models like a fly on the wall, I learned so much. And I think it also empowers me to have confidence to go into my own work and to not be afraid to just be myself and do it unashamedly.
Yeah. What was in terms of going into the industry, what was the first step when you decided, all right, I'm not going to study architecture. I'm going to take a year. I'm going to try and see how this works. What was step number one?
Step number one, I think for me, was figuring out how to play a show. I had never played a show that was not a talent show or a school a cappella performance. That was all I was familiar with, or maybe a cello recital. And so I set up with 2 friends. We did a show in LA at the Moroccan Lounge. I think it was August 1st was the date or something like that. Right after I graduated from high school. It was like 2 months out of graduating. And I opened for them. And I remember my parents drove me down in our family Subaru, and I had printed out a bunch of shirts that I designed and shipped them to our house. And so we were carrying them down in the Subaru, and I remember just feeling super sick to my stomach, just thinking about the fact that I was going to perform in front of people. It was so different than just like my peers or my family. It was like strangers. These were people I've never met before and had no familiarity with. And my parents, they sold my merch that night. They were overwhelmed, and they were the people that were in charge of doing it. And I remember, showing up on the stage and just thinking, there's no way people know my lyrics. It felt like this kind of like big test of showing up to a space and seeing if there was actual proof in this concept of pursuing music. Were people going to sing back the lyrics? Were people going to know my words and know my songs? And they did, thank God, because I think if they didn't, I probably would have just given up right there and gone to study architecture instead of doing music. Yeah.
What an incredible night, though. What an incredible moment. Did you leave that show feeling empowered? Was that like, right, I think I'm on the right path here?
I did. I felt terrified. I felt scared. I think there was almost a point in my kind of brain where I was like, I hope this fails, because it's a lot easier for me to think about doing college than it is to think about doing music. Like, college felt way more concrete to me than doing something like being a musician. I had no idea what that meant. And I didn't know what to do next. I think, I felt really lucky. My current managers ended up sending me an email and asking me if I wanted to meet. And I met them, and I loved them. And we ended up working together, and they could kind of provide me some guidance. But it was really scary. I was like, if I succeed at this show, what does that mean for me? And how do I take a next step in figuring out what to do next?
Yeah. And is that when the email came from management?
It did. And I feel like I'm so lucky. Like, I think stumbling is probably the best way to put it again. Like, I just kind of existed, and then I felt really lucky that things ended up in my pathway that worked out for me.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I can't even figure it out. I can't make sense of it now. Yeah.
Were you naturally performative?
I think I really liked performing. It felt fun to be able to kind of connect with people in an audience from being on stage. And in high school, I did a cappella. I would perform in plays. I did, even I was an admissions intern, which just meant that I ran open houses for my school to kind of present to prospective families about the school and everything. So I think I liked being able to entertain people. And I didn't know what that meant. I think, I wrote a letter to myself when I was 13 years old that asked my future self if I was pursuing acting, which I didn't end up pursuing at all. But
wow.
I think performing for me was always this kind of like funny dream that I had that I never thought would actually become a reality. It was just kind of like the way that a kid says they want to be like a princess growing up. I thought, maybe I'll be a performer. And I never actually realized that was possible for me. I just said it because I thought it sounded fun.
Yeah. What else was in that letter?
Oh my goodness. I believe it started off with saying, "Hi, Maya, do you actually have any friends?" And then it was kind of mean. It was like, I think it was like me being a 13-year-old trying to be like, I'm so funny, haha, let me bully my future self into like asking her if she even made any friends. But it was really funny. I think there were some sweet moments where I even asked myself at the very end of it, I was like, are you famous? Like, I think I was joking at the point of writing it, but it didn't turn out to be much of a joke, I guess, yeah.
But I guess by that point you'd already started putting or vlogging anyway, and putting things on YouTube, if I understand correctly. I think you were around about 12. So by the time you're 13 and you're writing that letter to yourself, I guess maybe you do have something in your mind that, I wonder if this is actually going to lead anywhere.
Yeah, I think it was fun to dream. It felt like fun to be able to post on YouTube and just pretend that I had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, even though there was 12 of them and 5 of them were just my own email accounts on separate different YouTube accounts. Like, I think it was so fun for me. It felt like playing dress up instead of playing, dress up. I was pretending to be a YouTuber and being like, hey guys, welcome back to my channel, even though there was no one there that was actually actively listening or watching. But, I always loved content creation, I think, too, because it was the main space that I saw people that could kind of reflect the way that I was and the way that I looked and the way that I felt. Like YouTube was kind of this pioneer space of different voices and perspectives being shared online for the first time. And I felt comfortable to be able to like do that as a 13-year-old because I thought, if these people are confident enough to share their stories and people are responding to it, maybe it's worth me trying to. And I'm glad that I did, but it is really funny. I was the 12-year-old that had no subscribers that was pretending to talk to thousands of people.
I'm sure you've told this story many times, so forgive me for asking it. But in terms of MXmtoon, that name, where that came from, did that come from? Because I think when you were about 11, you had an Instagram account where you would do illustrations. Does the tune relate to cartoon? Like, where did it actually come from?
It does. So it is a direct reference to the cartoon drawings that I would put online when I was 11. And my dad helped me come up with the username. He was like, you should use your initials and then just add tune at the end because it's like Maya's cartoons. And I was like, okay. So I just used it and I ended up posting with it. And I would use it as a Instagram username, a YouTube username, whatever place needed a username, I would use it because I think, everybody has that kind of username they get attached to that you kind of just apply to everything. It's easy. It's straightforward. And MXmtoon became that. It just was this universal moniker for everything that I was doing online. And so naturally, as I posted music, that was the name that came along with it. As I did YouTube, that was the name that came along with it. So it just naturally happened, I guess. And I'm lucky that I grabbed it early on because now I can have that username on as many platforms as I want. Yeah.
Just a few things just before we finish up, Maya. In terms of one thing we touched on briefly was you growing up in the music you were listening to. And we haven't really spoken about the ukulele much, but I understand that one of your favorite songs growing up was Somewhere Over the Rainbow by Iz.
Yeah.
Hawaiian artist, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he would perform that on ukulele. Was that one of the reasons why that instrument resonated with you, do you think?
I think I kind of recently realized how impactful that album, Facing Future from Iz, was in my life. And I had it on CD growing up, and so I would listen to it a lot. And I remember just being a little kid and swaying back and forth to Somewhere Over the Rainbow and thinking, this song is really pretty. And I don't think I really connected. I don't think we oftentimes really connect and understand these moments from our childhood that have like such impactful presence in our kind of later on life. But that song, I think, taught me the way that music could be beautiful. I think, I listened to funk music and I listened to R&B and soul music and those are all beautiful in their own way. But I think there was a simplicity to the way that Somewhere Over the Rainbow felt, and just knowing that this guy, he has a beautiful voice and he was just playing it over a little instrument that sounded like I could play it too. And I remember learning how to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow eventually when I learned how to play the ukulele when I was in middle school, and just thinking how cool it was that I could pick up this song that I remember listening to when I was a little kid and learn how to play it just the same way that he sang it. And I think that's really cool. And I think about that too, in the way that that song became something that I enjoyed listening and learning to. I hope that my music can be something that people can listen to and learn as well, and hopefully inspire other people to make music too. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And that, because a lot of your early music, I guess, was written on the ukulele, but it's now evolved into this multicolored pop kind of sensation, I guess. That, in terms of your relationship with your audience and not wanting to let them down, because I feel like you probably have such a strong connection with your audience that you feel a responsibility to them not to let them down. In terms of making that evolution in the sound of your music, was that something that felt natural? Did it feel like a risk in terms of your responsibility to your audience?
I think it felt definitely nerve-wracking, but I think in ways that for the last 3 years, I've kind of been building up to this moment of slowly, hopefully letting people grow up with me and also sonically. I mean, I think The Masquerade was a great example of kind of introducing people to some elements of more production and doing some more funky things. And then Dawn was a big testament to kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to make some pop songs. Hold your horses. Like, it's going to be okay. It's still going to sound like me, but it's going to be different. And Dusk was kind of a lyrical testament to kind of figuring out how do I advance the way that I was writing and kind of the themes and the topics that I was discussing. And then slowly getting to Rising, where it felt like, okay, I've done my work. I have shown you the production. I've shown you the lyrics. Let me put it into one whole project now, and you're going to see how it sounds. So I think I primed my audience to kind of expect it and understand it and be okay with it. But I also accredit it to the fact that they're just really nice people, and they always want me to be able to explore creatively what I want to do and are receptive to the change that I'm kind of experiencing and trying to apply to my music as well.
Yeah. Did that 13-year-old, that letter your 13-year-old wrote to yourself asking if you have any friends yet, is that what this community feels like?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's so cool because I wish I could just talk to my 13-year-old version of myself and be like, actually, I do have friends, so suck it. And let her know that there's a bunch of people like listening to me online and that I get to connect with, and I get to watch them grow up. I think in a lot of ways, I feel like the older sister for a lot of the kids that are in my audience, and understanding and watching them reach these huge milestones in their life. Like, I feel such empathy towards the younger version of myself and the journey that she's had and to the person I am today. And to be able to hold that and show that kindness, I think, to my audience. And, a lot of them just graduated from high school and they're entering college, and some of them are like changing their names to something else that they feel fits them better. Like, I think it's such a special moment to have that kind of relationship and dynamic with them. So my 13-year-old self, look at the way I am now. She would not be disappointed. She would be a little bit weirded out, though, I think.
And my last thing, just before we finish up, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Oh my gosh, so many people. I think, my music is nothing without its collaborators. On the latest project, Luke Nicolai is the executive producer for the entire project. He's helped me with projects like Dawn as well. Micah Premnath is one of the writers. Oh my gosh. The list goes on. Rosie, Pom Pom. Oh my gosh, Brandon, Jesse. There's too many people, but I think, music is nothing when it's not made with people you love and you care about and you trust. And I think that is my favorite part, is the community building of just being able to have that relationship between audience, between creators and collaborators, and coming together to all make something that we can appreciate and enjoy and carry with us. So it's a team effort. It's a group effort.
Nice one. And you will be coming to Australia in October, which is great news.
I'm so excited. Yeah. It's going to be fun. I've never been, so I'm looking forward to it.
What are you expecting of the shows? Do you have any expectations at all?
Oh my goodness. I wasn't expecting them to sell as many tickets as they're currently selling. I think there is a piece of me being like, I'm not going to actually have anybody show up to these shows, but I definitely am going to have people show up to these shows. And I'm really excited. I fully expect to accidentally slip into an Aussie accent because I'll just mimic the way that people sound, which isn't good. I'm not proud of it, but it happens when I'm in England. So I imagine it might happen when I'm in Australia. Yeah.
I'd love to hear your English accent.
Oh God, I think the English one is better than the Australian one.
And I presume your parents won't be coming down to sell merch this time. Times that things have moved on. I don't
think so. It's a little bit farther than LA. So, I think, if I drag them along, my dad might be a little bit wary of how long the plane ride is.
Well, Maya, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It's been so nice to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Rod.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to MXmtoon for her time, and thank you for listening. Just a reminder that MXmtoon's latest album, Rising, is out now. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.